Hi, everybody. Just give us 5 minutes. We're just letting everybody in and we shall start. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fifth edition of Stories at the Loft. We're extremely excited to have you all with us today. And this time around, we'll be talking about adaptive reuse and urban regeneration. We've got an exciting panel lined up for us with Tim from Squire and Partners, Natalie from EAA, and Puran from Studio PK. Mrinalini will be moderating the event. And so before I bring on Mrinalini, I would just like to say a couple of things and introduce her. So Mrinalini Gadyok is an architect by training, a visualizer by heart, and a writer by passion. Having worked in architecture, lighting design, historical research, and writing for more than a decade, she shifted focus to the narrative of design experiences and stepped into design and architecture publishing as the founding editor of Mondo Arc India and stirworld.com. Currently an independent consultant, she extends her passion for architecture, design, craft, and art by creating discourse through critical writing and curatorial practices. So, Mrinalini, if we could have you join us.
Thanks, Noel. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much for that introduction and a very, very warm welcome to our audience here today. I'm very excited to be a part of Stories at the Loft, and we have a very exciting and a very pertinent subject at hand today, which is adaptive reuse in architecture, which fundamentally translates to breathing new life into an existing and often abandoned structure, as well as enabling it to emerge as a commercially viable, environmentally sustainable, and programmatically flexible solution, all the while preserving its identity and perhaps also accentuating its value within the urban fabric. Usually seen as but not restricted to historical markers or culturally significant symbols, these structures can be identified and transformed to effectively activate spaces, not only within specific boundaries, but also transcend them, possibly culminating as catalysts for reviving and rejuvenating spaces in and around the building and creating a sense of place for the community at an urban scale. Today, we will be exploring the many layers, processes, and stories that exist and come into existence when rehabilitating lost architecture. We have with us a fine set of designers who have worked in the field and will be sharing with us their experiences and thoughts. So please join me in welcoming Tim Gladstone, a partner at Squire and Partners, Natalie Tombach, senior architect and group leader of the London office at EAA, which is the Emra Aralad Architecture, and of course, Puran Kumar, the principal at Studio PKA. Welcome you all. I request you all to, okay, so all your videos are on. So we will have each one of these architects present some of their work with us, and that will be followed by a panel discussion. I do want to encourage our audience to share their comments and questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Please do keep sending in your comments and questions, and we'll try to pick them up as and when we can, along with the presentations itself. So I would like to begin today with Tim. Please allow me to introduce him. Tim is a partner at Squire and Partners, which is an architecture and design practice with experience spanning 4 decades, earning it an international reputation for architecture informed by the history and culture of where it is placed. Tim has taken a lead role in the design direction of the practice and delivered several prestigious central London residential developments. He has also led the practice's design and interiors team to create his office at the department store, which subsequently won a REBA National Award. We will be seeing this project in greater detail today. Tim recently also led the design of the new hyperlocal Brixton workspace, the department store studios developed by Squire and Partners. Leading a team of architects, illustrators, interior designers, and model makers, Tim's creative input continues to shape the direction of the practice. A very, very warm welcome, Tim, and we look forward to this very exciting presentation that you have for us today.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good evening, and maybe even good morning to some of you. Absolute pleasure to be here and to share our little story of the department store and the department store studios. I have started sharing my screen. Hopefully that's everyone can see this.
Yes.
Is that all good? Fantastic. Okay. Well, welcome to the story of department store, which is based in Brixton, which is a sort of suburb of London and not really an area that was really known for workplace. And I'll tell you how this project came about. So the history of Brixton's very interesting. It was incredibly rich when it was first kind of created in about the 1900s, and the building on the right that we found was just off the main road, and the benefit of that was as the years of time went past over, people refurbishing the shops along the main Brixton High Street, this building was kind of forgotten and just left behind. Its original purpose as a department store, furniture and furnishing building, basically was soon became a depository, and then it slowly became a bit of a post office. At the bottom there, you can see things being boarded up, grills got put over it, and it was just left alone. But Brixton itself is rich little marketplace, very vibrant community, and here you get a sense of what Brixton was like on the left and is like today. Quite famous now for the Windrush generation, which was post-war. Lots of Caribbean communities were settled in Brixton, and that sort of Caribbean culture adds a whole layer to the decadence that was once here. Its history goes back to its relationship back to Paris, where this gentleman on the bottom right was based in another little suburb called Tooting. He won an accumulator on a racehorse, this one here called Rosebery, and it was sort of an unprecedented amount he won, and he was able to say, I'm going to copy that department store in Paris and bring it to London. So this is one of the first department stores in the country, in an area that no one can really believe that would have been the case. Slightly, the skills really is the building as we found it. This is actually even partly cleared out, but you can see it was in a terrible state of repair. But we wanted to really embrace what we were finding. So the first thing to do is kind of scratch away at the surface, reveal what, and see what you can find. And we actually felt there's a real charm in these kind of, they're not sort of bullet holes, but they are actually where full ceilings were put in place to try and turn this into an office. You can even see the tide lines on the wall where decoration over the years kind of just kept shying away from what actually lay beneath. Of course, we found this magnificent and wanted to celebrate everything we found. The existing palette of materials is incredibly rich. It's sort of the arts and crafts period that was happening in United Kingdom at the time. The finest materials, a celebration of the British Empire, bringing some of the best in class back to Brixton. The great thing about high quality materials is all we had to do was sand them away, and these amazing hardwoods still looked as good today as they did then. Even better, some of the tiles, as you see revealed here, were hidden away underneath boxing that was there to protect, was put up to protect the showroom as it became a storeroom over 100 years ago. And we were the first to reveal the tiling that's pretty much impeccable. Learning from the materials in the building, this actually teaches us about which materials are appropriate to put back in. Finding copper, using copper in its patinated and unpatinated state. We added new timber, much more sustainable than the hardwoods that were here, but using plywood, again, using plywood in a stained and unstained way. And then we used green oak, which is sort of naturally aging oak that we cut from renewable forests in, sadly, our King Henry VIII used up all our trees on shipbuilding. And but fortunately in nearby in Europe, in France and Germany, it's possible to get naturally seeded a forested oak where we did our top floor out of. That's what the building was telling us, but what's really important with buildings is how they talk to the community, where they sit, and we chose an opportunity, sort of London design festivals, to embrace team up with the Brixton community and say, look, we've got a blank canvas here. And so we created a street gallery in 2015. We did the same again in one of our other neighboring streets in 2016. And that actually started to build a whole community. And whilst we're building the building, we're almost sort of live sketching, learning about the community, learning from the building itself, and bringing all this together. And this is a drawing that our wonderful illustration department did probably about 2 years ahead of us finishing the building. And you can see all the life and vibrancy of Brixton in every last little detail. We wanted to bring that into the building. The building's also 3 times as larger than our previous office, and we realised that in taking on a bit of cityscape, really, that having shop windows, the ability to display was really important. Actually, and to bring in other uses such as rehousing the post office, which was absolutely essential in our mind, and particularly in a sort of a delivery Amazon world. The post office actually is a huge part of everyone's daily life. We've got a coffee roasting, a vinyl record shop, which was a local business that we helped expand. Kabula was a catering business that could help bring life to our events, our own office, and a bar and restaurant. So a little journey through the building. I'm going to go quickly through this, but we can pick up on this later. The reception feels more like a shop than it does an office reception. Display cases are there, reveal everything we do, and we can change the display and get involved with community events in our window displays too. In our ground floor, actually right now, this event space, it's somewhere that we could use for 250 people to sit down and get a presentation or do professional, well, we could be doing a talk like this in there right now. But right now, it's actually become a gallery. It's been a gallery for the last week for art under £5,000 and a live auction that goes to charity. As you move up through the building, this is the magnificent staircase that we could, that it was talking to us. We could regild some of the lily leaves. The tiles presented themselves, but we kept the rest quite raw, and we could trace the line of the lighting and put things back where they once were, and reinterpreting it with new craft. The lifts are decadent, but also we keep the graffiti, and we learn from these beautiful arts and craft windows, and actually start taking those patterns and developing those into other things. Off to the side, there's an annex where we house our meeting rooms, and our toilets are very decadent, and we have a little bit of humor in there where we have French signs saying "Occupé" and "Libre" rather than busy and vacant as you might have in English. Graffiti is kept in some places. We go on amusing radio shows, trying to hunt these artists down, and the squatters that once enjoyed parties, but we kept the art in place, and we opened up and revealed our way through. And the building gets even more magnificent on the top floor, where we've set the roof back, created a whole new floor, which has a south-facing roof terrace with a series of rooms, and that's now become a members bar and restaurant for all creatives and the local community who can come up and enjoy that. And the great thing is this building is now being used 7 days a week from 7 a.m. until 1 a.m. The dome had been damaged in war damage, so we chose to have an emblem of creativity of our own sort of exquisite contemporary craft, using parametric design, but Swiss designers with this sort of cushion glass to create this magnificent private dining space. We worked with local fashion and textile designers, Eli Kishimoto, who are, I suppose, a little bit like us. They're both sort of local but also international, and we commissioned them to come up, to have the free ride to take inspiration from the building. And although everyone lived and worked in Brixton for sort of decades, not many people have been inside and seen this building revealed. So here's some beautiful patterns that are derived from this mushroom bunch that comes off the stairs, as you like, tiles, wild clematis that became this wonderful rug that we have, and so on with the other patterns. And you can see those patterns resonating through the scheme. Teamwork is absolutely key, and what we really got going with is talking about having collaborators. It's a showroom for everyone we create and work with, and it's a building that all our clients and businesses can bring people back to, and that gives it a fantastic extra life. So here's some rugs that we developed, all generated from the As You Like tiles patterns. These are made in Nepal. supporting communities there. They have a men team and a female team, which is quite fun. Display is really important, and we bought vintage cabinets, but also then work with some of the best cabinet makers we work with today to do our own reception desk and artists based upon to come up with new craft there. And that's that being created. Lighting, working with international companies such as Floss, developing new types, and Louis Poulsen, but then also British companies as well called BTC, and showcasing what can be done. And also utilizing lots of the timber and materials from the building, all of it being over 100 years old. Even the pine is fantastic and worth reusing. So we reinterpret the new materials into new tables and designs. And this is an end grain super table that can be packed away. So this is the conclusion really of just showing with careful consideration and those layers of thought, how you can take something that most people on the left can't really see, but the beauty actually just lies beneath, and then following a code, you can bring it back to its beyond its former glory in many ways. And the final summary really is the building. This is the building now in life. Those design trails then go on to create these craft markets inside the building, fun window displays. My cheeks still hurt from blowing up those balloons. And beyond boundaries, and we can take part in those local festivals. And finally, we're just completing the department store studios, which you can see here, which is a building that's taken its brief from the original building. It was only the ground floor that was there, and we've built upon that to create a new CLT and brick building that will have a new bar and restaurant, and it actually opens up the workspace to to the wider community who can buy into our whole process. So thank you very much. I look forward to questions later, of course.
Thank you, Tim. That was absolutely fascinating. I have a few questions of my own that I'd like to ask you, but we'll hold on to that for a while.
Yep.
Next up, we've got Natalie Tombach. Like I said, she's Senior Architect and Group Leader of the London office of EAA. EAA was founded in 2004 by Emre Aralat and Gonca Pashurlar. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. They're based in Istanbul. With offices in New York, London, and Istanbul, the practice pivots its considerations on the interpretation of the context in its widest sense rather than specific visual correspondences. Natalie first came to EAA in 2003 as an intern, and then joined the practice in 2006 after her undergraduate studies in architecture. She has been there since, and she has been the team leader in many projects of varying scales and has valuable skills and expertise in renovation and restoration of old buildings for new users. One of her most significant projects is the Abdullah Gül City Campus and the Abdullah Gül Presidential Museum and Library, which is the first presidential museum in Turkey. Both projects are restorations of existing buildings in a former textile factory, which was designed by Russian architects led by Ivan Nikolev in 1935. Natalie will be sharing some of these works with us today. So a very warm welcome, Natalie, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I'll try to be quick as much as possible. And thanks again for inviting us to be a part of today's talk. From my personal experience, I love working on adaptive use projects. And I was lucky enough to be involved in most of these projects in our office. Let me quickly share my screen. Is it on? Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Today I'm going to take you one of the inner cities of Turkey and tell you all about how we transformed an abandoned textile factory into a university campus, and get in a bit more detail on this particular museum building. This is the current state of the restored campus. It covers 380,000 square meters and has around 15 heritage buildings that were once belonged to the factory. To give you a reference, this project is in Kayseri, and this is one of the inner cities of Turkey, and performs as an important industrial hub. It keeps remnants of Anatolian vernacular, is famous as a ski destination, And it is very close to Cappadocia, where some of you might know from the giant conical rock formations. The facility we inherited was one of the first attempts of industrialization of the young republic, dated back to 1935. The complex was designed in Moscow by Russian architects. The design is simple, functional, modern campus type mass production facility, basically. Here you can see the layout of the factory before the interventions. Now, what is unique about this place is that apart from the production buildings, there was also a theater, a clubhouse, an infirmary, nursery, and sports facilities. So it was quite a change for people who would work there all day and then meet with their wives in the club building, have parties and social activities. As a result, this neighborhood was named after this factory as Sumer, and the areas around were also developed as workers' housing. So it is fair to say that this place was more than a factory. It built a community and had an active place in public life. And after the complex was closed at the end of 90s, this place became out of use, out of reach, literally in the middle of the city. And during the abandoned years, the buildings lost most of their original parts to theft and vandalism. And fortunately, years later, it was transferred to become a new generation state university named after Mr. Gül, who was the president at the time. It is also notable to say that the complex received industrial heritage status in 2008. And we were commissioned to design the master plan and the first phase of the campus for educational and recreational programs. This is the original layout of the plant, and this is the original drawing, the site plan, which we based our master plan design, as it has a plain but distinctive layout strategy. The idea behind our approach was to retain and repurpose as much as possible, preserving the existing landscape as well. And in order to make this place a public hub again, we propose to have public programs like urban agriculture, lifelong learning center, and of course, cultural programs like museums and galleries. And to use the old worker houses as student accommodations. For the first stage, we converted and extended an existing warehouse as the main faculty building. Actually, the warehouse was an insignificant part of the factory, and it did not have a heritage status like the other buildings. Our client's first instinct was to get rid of it, but we felt that it was important to make the start of this regeneration process by setting an example by using the existing fabric. Now I would like to move on to the renovation of the power plant here, as seen in yellow. As a part of our master plan, the old power plant and steam stations were designated to be the cultural elements of the campus. So we were commissioned to renovate these buildings as Abdullah Gül Presidential Museum and Library of Political Sciences. The state of corrosion on both buildings were dramatic. They had various additions and alterations over the years as well. So as a starting point, we had to determine the original and authentic parts of the buildings. We had limited amount of resources, such as these original drawings. And the complex at the time relied on its own power station to generate electricity from coal and steam. So we studied the nature of these buildings. Even found some old employees now in their 80s and interviewed them to understand the inner workings better. And it was almost like an archaeological search to compare these findings and drawings with what we inherited, which I think is the most fun part. And I would say it was not really a challenge to fit the museum program inside this building, as it had these massive volumes of spaces to fit for a, very fit for a public space. But handling building services was a massive issue to tackle. And we tried not to change the general layout much by preserving the original space qualities. Ground level is mainly the entrance and services, and the upper level is the exhibition areas. Actually, settling on a right approach for the existing surfaces holds a major role for this particular building because it had so much patina that could reach today. And as much as we love the texture that was handed to us, we still had to take it to a level that would seem more refined and clean. But at the same time, we had a holistic design decision that the interventions were not going to be so much so that everything would look shiny and new. So essentially, the idea was to maintain what was old as it is and not to make it look new. We made detailed analysis of existing surfaces. Every single intervention was unique to its specific room, but it was always towards retaining what is already there. We like to call this approach a sanitation process. And over the years of 70 years that this building was alive, it was used in many ways. Alterations were made, and we could see that in these partial surface treatments. And so we decided to use this colorful composition as we found it. And by doing this, instead of choosing one particular period, all traces of time became visible, including the new additions that came with the new museum program. And if we had to add a new partition, or in this case, the reinforcement walls, we made them blend within the existing surfaces. Here are some before and after pictures of treated areas. And where we lost the original elements, like here, most of the cement tilings were gone, we made new terrazzo filling in harmony with the old one. We reproduced the window frames according to their original details. We decided not to insulate the building from other facade, instead solved climate issues with MEP interventions. This way we could preserve what was left of the original exterior surface, and the original yellow color made its way back, but not as a shiny new coating, rather a slight tint just where it was lost. And let me say that the first lady wasn't too keen on this yellow color, but that's a story for another day. This is the starting point of the new exhibition hall, where you can see the authentic materials with the new exhibition displays. And here we managed to preserve the existing skylight with its original framework. Here is the temporary gallery after the original void was opened. And as you can see, each room is basically different in a different color and material scheme, just as we found it. Now, the most eccentric part of this building is the main turbine hall, which is the ultimate spot to understand the workings of this building's original function. The first area is where the coal goes right up into the building. And from the area number 2, the coal goes down from these massive grills into the chimneys that are connected to the turbines. Now, of course, there weren't any turbines when we inherited the building, but these are the things we managed to learn from interviews from with the old employees. And in these turbines, the coal is basically burnt and all the excess ash goes down into the pits below. Now, as you can see in picture number 4, we weren't aware of these pits because they were all covered with a concrete slab. But and the only place they were visible was from the level below. So yeah, these are the ash pits as a whole after we discovered them during the restoration process and went through an extensive conservation. And now they are a part of the exhibition space as a reminder of the origins of the building. I think a successful adaptive reuse recognizes what's special about the building, and the exhibition team acknowledged that, and they gracefully designed all the new material in sync with the aura of the space. Now moving on to the steam station that was going to be renovated as the library Well, this presented a whole different set of problems than the previous building. This is a photograph from 1936. The east facade can be seen as a flat surface. And this is from the 90s. It can see that this one had a very poor addition to the same facade. And the first intervention was to remove the latter additions and reveal the original window space. We designed and manufactured this glass facade and all with the original steel profiles and detailing. And inner surfaces were severely contaminated because of the machines burning gas for many years, and most of the finishes inside was already gone. So these are also the original machine parts that couldn't be stolen because they're massive, and it meant that they could remain as authentic parts of the building. And to achieve the necessary display and reading areas, we decided to add a new partition inside the main hall and design different types of reading rooms throughout the building. This is a section showing the existing situation of the main hall. And here we added a 3-story bookshelf unit. It's a light steel structure, only clad with rows of books. And as you can see in this building, the emphasis, the contrast between the parts that are from different eras are more recognizable than the museum building. So where we lost most of the patina, most of the authentic surfaces, now we have a new layer of books and the new texture it presents. Here are some of the pictures from interior. Here you can see the original ceramic tilings where we matched with new industrial wood. And we used Jean Prouvé's furnitures as a continuation of the design language. These are from where the concrete bases are. Now they are just in a relaxed reading room. And I'll finish with these images really. I hope I didn't extend my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. A fabulous project. Again, a lot of points that we can discuss based on this. We already have a couple of questions coming in, but I'll keep them for a little later because I think they're relevant to all the presentations that we've got today. So to go on to our next presentation, we have Pooran Kumar, the principal of Studio PKA. To quickly introduce him, believing in creating spaces that exude a strong sense of place and identity, Pooran established his practice more than 25 years ago. Today, he continues to explore and adopt fresh, innovative, and exciting new ways of breathing life into the wide gamut of projects that come his way, from corporate interiors to residential spaces and explorations in adaptive reuse. Pooran's repertoire of architecture interior projects is as wide as it is simple. Since its inception, the studio has flourished as a professional architecture and design house. Its projects have continued to embody a strong sense of place and identity, attributes which the studio relates with and strives to achieve. They believe in telling stories and weaving narratives that make the design process immersive, vivid, and intimate. With simplicity, elegance, and functionality at the core of their design ethos, the practice seeks to envision and create meaningful spaces that exude a sense of comfort and an air of tranquility. Pooran, I hand the floor over to you for your project.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mrinalini. Hi, Tim. Hi, Natalie. Some amazing presentations preceding ours. We hope we can do justice to this panel. Thank you very much also on behalf of Studio PKA for being here with us and honoring our invitation to come and speak to the audiences in India from London and also for projects from Turkey. Thank you so very much, Tim and Natalie. And Mrinalini, thank you to you too. I'll try and go on to our presentation and post which we can get into conversations. We're going to touch upon the subject of adaptive reuse in our city, Mumbai. So south of Mumbai. We've been here for the last few years as the Loft, our own studio, a project that has been seen and it's been talked about internationally, where we have had an intervention in our design ethos, in our design respect for the architecture that exists in the city. We also talking about an unbuilt project today, which is where we are elaborating on project 1 and 2, the Loft and Tianu, are two projects that have been built in this part of the city. This is our studio. 5 years back, we moved to this studio and we moved into this 110-year-old building, which was completely defunct, and it had no life whatsoever in it. And it was asking for some respect. It was asking for some attention. And in order to go from what it looked like before to what we are here today, it took a lot of respect, as I've heard before in this session, for the original piece of architecture, and to ensure that your treatment of surfaces, of areas, of design solutions matched what was required to be done in the building. And that's where we have been, and we've enjoyed. This process triggered for us to do another project in Ballard Estate, also in South Mumbai. This is a retail store, which we took up once again in an absolutely toned down building, which then, after our design intervention, in order to create a lifestyle and furniture store, which looked like this before we took it up, ended up being like this, where we were very, very sensitive about the materials that we had inherited, whether it is the old metal that was bracing the wood or the old wooden slabs that we had as rafters, and ensuring that we kept the basic ethos of that zone, the architecture in which the buildings were there, and the spaces were there, and also to ensure that the need for today, for where we are in the modern world, matched what we needed to do. However, that took us to our project that we are going to talk about today, the estate, which is actually an unbuilt project. It's a proposal for the public spaces which are there as part of Ballard Estate. Now, Ballard Estate happens to be a commercial district in South Mumbai. It has a series of buildings, and among those buildings are these courtyards that are trapped. And these courtyards have been unused and actually abused for a very, very long time. And our objective as a design studio is to ensure that there is some dialogue, some conversation, some intention towards improving these public spaces and give them back to the public that so deserves to actually live not only inside these beautiful structures, which are all more than 100-year-old in South Mumbai, but even among the public spaces within these districts. This is some of the glimpses of what Ballard Estate looks like today. Early morning, as the day progresses, activities like these where vendors come over to the streets and they do business through the day, whether it's food stalls or day-to-day items which are sold over there. After having seen the life in and around Ballard Estate and having studied how we could intervene and improve some of the programs over there, we went about actually putting our study together, where we felt these courtyards, 4 of these over here among the buildings, which are about 25-30 buildings over there, with a lot of green, as you can see in this particular illustration, and this avenue. That's number 2, the avenue which binds the peripheral roads from north to south. And we thought we could have these spaces which were lying unused for a good 50 odd years or maybe more, to such a degree of utility, where we could bring the people who are there in the buildings to come out and utilize these spaces, live these areas just as they are living inside the buildings. Some of the programs here where the alleys combine these courtyards, and you could have walkways going through the alleys. That's the master plan. So what we're talking about here are these courtyards, A, B, C, and D, which are courtyard 1 to 4. And E is another area of major intervention here, which is the avenue. I'll briefly take you through these spaces. This is what it looks like today. Courtyard 1. What we were proposing was to have some sort of working space, a space where people could come out and network, work on their own, or meet their friends, or cafeterias which could just be spilling out of the building, and some kind of seating area which could become somewhat like this. Our objective here as a studio is to give the space back to the people who are utilizing these office buildings, and they have nowhere to go When it's lunchtime or it's time at the end of the day, people only spill out to the streets and roads, whether to have a snack or to come out and meet their friends. All the more today, when the world is going through this crisis where people need to be out in the open and be by themselves and not just cooped up in small closed spaces, we feel spaces like these where the seating is allowed to be out there in the open, and it's very welcoming. It's extremely inviting to be out in the open in some seasons when it's not very sunny. Let's say morning and the evenings. Also in the under the shade, let's just say in the afternoons, they spill out cafes, giving you the kind of atmosphere that you're so lacking in a city like ours. South Mumbai actually has a massive density in terms of the buildings, very few green spaces. The green spaces that we have potentially available are like this. This is Courtyard 2 in the estate, where we felt that we could try and create some other functions, other programs like recreation. So we tried to create here an amphitheater, which has been proposed along with a cafe and seating under the shade, which could begin to look like this. So you have the buildings actually catering to cafes at the back, a sunken area which could become a recreational space, and nicely paved areas which you don't mind walking around with your friends or just being out there and take a little corner and have some of your meetings or be connected to the world. There's a little art installation over here, which is a little art gallery in this particular courtyard that we could create. Courtyard 3 is where we have the services. Mind you, years of not being looked after or being abused, there are criminal activities going on in that zone, and so the police has to mind that area, keep it under lock and key. But these areas, when given enough attention, could lead to public services like toilets, and they could provide shaded seating. There's an electric substation here as well. We are proposing that we have public toilets created in this zone, so people who are out there, maybe not working there, just come out for a meeting to Ballot State, could use these public utilities and could use these spaces to go and sit under the tree. I'll go through Courtyard 4, where there's an art gallery. There are settlements over there. There are stakeholders over there. There's an art gallery. There's a furniture store, lifestyle store. There are international furniture brands over there. There are media center offices over there. We have some of these areas to be given back to some of these cultures that exist there. There's an art gallery which we are proposing that in this particular courtyard actually has an extension out in the open. We may not have big exhibitions outside. The big artists would obviously take the space here, which is the art gallery behind this wall. But the same art gallery can actually maintain some of these spaces in the open, and young, talented artists could have their exhibitions out here. Creating an atmosphere here, creating an ambiance, a kind of a scene over here actually creates an energy which is so conducive to working, living, and spending time visiting Ballot State as well. The objective of the studio, in order to create these courtyards as spaces that become one with the interiors of these buildings, thereby bringing that balance that the exterior has completely lost over a period of years. Last but not the least is this most important avenue, which connects, as I said, north to the south of Ballot State. As you can see, there are multiple islands over here, which can be created to have a program, to be designed for programs of different kind, whether we can have the green, we could have the walker's path over there. We've designed vendors and the kiosks stalls over there, where right now life looks somewhat like this in Ballot State. This is typical mid-morning or a lunch hour scene where you have people selling food or selling wares on the streets. You have parking, which is not organized, and yet there's plenty of space, as you can see in these photographs. Our proposal here is to convert these spaces into public spaces that are organized, that are efficient, that are respectful of architecture, as well as full of utility value for its inhabitants. Some of the intervention here, for example, in this blown up section, as you can see, is that we could have space programs to have a lot of green. We could have parks here, which we've designed over here for the walkways, or people can go out for a quick workout. There's seating spaces under the shades, as you can see in this one. Whereas on this particular patch, we are suggesting not just the seating zones, but the kiosks and the plazas in and around the kiosks. So lunch hour or the evening hours become extremely important for the entire strength of people coming out from these 30 odd buildings to the avenue, making it into a very pleasant experience for them, not just to catch up with friends, maybe get some work out of the way, conduct some meeting, maybe have a snack or a meal and get on their way. Some of these interventions from our perspective will be very important in bringing the life as it should be, as these courtyards and the common spaces possibly were planned in the first place, with urban planners and architects coming into the picture, where we have the vision to convert these public spaces into what they can be lending to the society in a cultural give back to the public. To us, the community around there, the working community, or the community that comes to the working people over there, is extremely important. It's deserving of all the public spaces that are potentially available. As Studio PKA, we are proposing this. We are taking this project to the stakeholders, to the authorities very soon. Our objective is that if these spaces, which are highlighted in this final slide of ours, could be done justice to, they could be brought something similar to what, say, Square and Partners have done to the local community and the space in and around Brixton, for people to come and utilize these spaces in one building. What we are trying to do here is that a similar kind of an advantage, a similar kind of a privilege can be offered to the people in Ballard State. This is our humble attempt towards adaptive reuse of public spaces in south of Bombay. I guess for the presentation, I will stop here. Thank you. Thanks very much. The more as we go along and talk to everybody. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Puran. I think we've got some really interesting presentations with us today, and we've got some very interesting things to talk about as we go ahead. So I'm going to open the floor to the panel discussion. We do have some questions coming in. I encourage our audience to share their comments and questions, and we'll keep picking them up. But before we start our discussion, I'd like to kind of begin today by taking a step back and talking about the idea of adaptive reuse in architecture, questioning why, if at all, it is important for us. And as architects and designers, how do we tap into existing buildings instead of, building afresh? Why do we do that? We know that the global population is continuing to rise exponentially at that. In fact, people's needs are greater than ever before. They need to be sheltered. They are occupying more and more space. And to cater to all of this, we are building constantly, right? Whether it's infrastructure, housing facilities, public spaces, whatever it may be, but we are clearing virgin ground, we are depleting resources, and most significantly, we are hastening the detrimental impact that's happening on our natural environment. I believe that there is some new research by a construction blog called BIMHOW, which states that the construction sector contributes to 23% of the air pollution, 50% of the climatic change, 40% of drinking water pollution, and 50% of landfill wastes. And a separate research by the US Green Building Council, which is the USGBC, states that the construction industry accounts for 40% of worldwide energy usage, with estimations that by 2030, emissions from commercial buildings will grow by 1.8%. Now, these are some really sort of strong and important numbers and statistics. But in light of this, it is also said that the greenest building is the one that already exists. So if we look at this, are we saying that adaptive reuse in architecture is the future of design and architecture today? Open to all. Tim, would you like to go first? I saw you taking notes.
Yeah, no, very, very well put. I think it absolutely is the ultimate starting point to not only reuse the buildings, but also I think, to completely blur their functions. We're seeing that anyway, with the way we've all been working and living through this dreaded COVID, but that sort of agile working, different ways of living, and if we can get buildings working 3 times as hard, then we only need one building, not 3. You know, to put legs on that. Back to the department store, we're open from 7 a.m. and it closes at 1 a.m. and it's not just for us, it's public coming in and out. It's got the bar, restaurant happening, event spaces, and then it has an activation at night as well. So I think thinking about timeline is really important, how buildings can keep working, and blurring those functions is something that certain city councils struggle with. You know, it's this is zoned for this, you can't do that, and that is a big shake up right there when you can get something working 3 times harder. So I think it's a huge part, adaptive reuse of what you've got to start with, but also changing the uses going forward. What's great is good design actually can handle lots of uses. So you're doing good quality, how buildings learn, buildings that are designed well with good daylight, good ceiling heights, can actually live on and take on any function. So form shouldn't really follow function. form well, the function should be just shelters for humans that make you feel good, that can do anything.
I think you bring up a very important point, and what we're also talking about is not only being responsible for what has been built and how we use it currently, but also what we are building and how it can be used in the future, right? So even if we are doing adaptive reuse of existing buildings that have been forgotten or dilapidated or abandoned, we have to be conscious and mindful of what we do to it and how long we can extend its lifespan. Natalie, would you like to add to that?
Well, actually, I would like to go a bit back. And in addition to what you and Tim said, I think, yeah, of course, we have to be mindful of this new ecological disaster that we are in. But also it's our responsibility, isn't it, to continue this social conscience and cultural conscience that, historically to extend our history into the next generations. How much more that we can bring new buildings to this earth while we all have all these existing industrial and historical heritage that we have just laying in there. I mean, especially in Turkey, we have all these very historic buildings, also many industrial buildings that are laying low or near derelict. But year after year, also public and government also are being more conscious about bringing these buildings into life. So there is a positive change, of course, but we are nowhere near where it should be. So I feel very positive about where we are now, but also in terms of this ecological situation that we are in, I see that there is this LEEDs and BREEAM certificates, processes going on, and especially in Turkey, most of these certificates are being given to the buildings as a selling or publicist thing, instead of being a real thing that could be useful to extend the building's life or being sensible about the ecology. So also this is something that I think should be more into light and be discussed. For example, in our project, in this Kayseri project, we started to get involved in this LEED process, and finally we did. But our clients' response to most of the things were like, okay, let's do this in a very minimal way, gets this certificate, and not to do all the things that is required. This is also, I think, I really would like to know about the other panelists' experiences about the client being involved in this ecological process as well. I think I kind of redirected your question, but I'm really curious about this issue.
No, I'm glad, actually we can just pick it up from here, because I wanted to touch upon the idea when you said that your client wanted to raise one of the buildings to the ground, but you decided that no, it has some value, right?
Yeah.
And that value, you proved it to the client by redeveloping that structure and adding value to it. So Puran, would you've done the Tiano, the showroom, and your own loft for that matter, where you were the client and you were the architect. How do you deal with that? What is your response to it?
So first of all, one strongly believes that if you are able to reuse, you should not be. So it's at least to sustainability. It makes sure that you are looking at a green solution to a building. As Tim says, the greenest building is the one that already exists. So we strongly believe that if the space is available and it can be adapted to a certain function that there is, we have the wherewithal. I think architects like us, and allow me to say this with a bit of an accent over here, that if there are people who have the wherewithal to actually convert, look at the department store. If you have the wherewithal to actually pick up something which is completely beaten and done to death by time and by the circumstance, or war-torn Turkey for that matter, and what EAA is doing over there. The very reason why we are here together is because you completely connect with the kind of work that these firms are doing in their own cities, in their countries. If you believe that you have the power to bring back life to architecture which has seen an era, whether it has been then affected by war or by time or by neglect, I think you should do that, because that's where your responsibility as not just architects and designers, but as citizens who are socially aware, who are culturally aware, who are historically aware, comes into play. We strongly believe that. I'm a big believer in making sure that the old, for whatever purpose it was built, is not neglected. So there are apartments that we have resurrected. I'm not bringing all the work that we've done in this area forever. And Mrinalini, you know a bit of South Bombay. So there are beautiful apartments and buildings, and buildings which have been restored to their to get another lease of life, or get another 25, 50 years lease of life, which we've done to ensure that you're not wasting away the resource that's available, the beauty of architecture or the style that you have inherited, whether it's an Art Deco building or whether it's a Victorian architecture, which has been left behind by the Raj. We have all of that heritage in this city, Tim, and some of that your ancestors will be part of. And we are proud to be able to take care of some of that architecture, simply because it's not just utility value, but because it's beautiful. A lot of thought has gone into something where I'm sitting at the moment at the Loft. A lot of thought has gone into it, and we applied ourselves for a good 6 months to ensure that all that was inherited was retained, restored. There's a 100-year-old staircase that's there over here in this building. There's a 110-year-old lift that comes into an elevator that comes into the studio. So stuff like that you have love for, and you don't want to give that up. You do not want to give that up. Likewise for the store, as you mentioned, I think you've been there, Mrinalini.
Yeah.
Somehow the conversation that you had with the space wanted that space to, it just asked for that lease of life, which was so important, and it needs respect. In principle, Natalie, if I was to tell you, it requires a lot of conviction to ensure that your clients understand that you're working for them, that you're working in their interest, that you're working beyond maybe their vision. You have a vision to ensure that architecture restores its glory. You do that. You fight. You put resistance in this entire exercise from your side, because you have the conviction to do it. At least that's what I believe in, Mrinalini.
No, I think what's really interesting over here is we keep coming back to the word inherited, right? We're inheriting a lot of things from the past, and we're working with that. I recently read somewhere, unfortunately, I don't remember where, but it said that preserving historical buildings is important because buildings are part of our collective cultural patrimony. Just as we recognize the value of art and artists, historical buildings embody a vast array of crafts and artistic skill that is no longer utilized in modern construction. And my question here is that, does this then become a device for us to kind of bridge our past and our present, and in fact taking that out into the future, which we've kind of, in a way, we've addressed over here. But I'm also curious to know that, when we are dealing with these kind of buildings and we are dealing with this kind of architecture, at what point do we draw the line? At what point do we say that we are going to preserve something and we are going to either add to it, or we're going to change it or alter it? And what's interesting here is that all three of the projects that we've seen are addressing very, very different typologies, right? And are doing this in very different degrees. So I'd like each one of you to comment on it, because we see examples like the Tate Modern, which was a warehouse at one point, a museum now. We've seen, water tanks and water towers converted to student housing. We've seen we've seen David Chipperfield do a lot of work in Berlin, and absolutely beautiful, right? But everyone's approach is different. And I'd like for you to comment a little bit about your specific approach on each of the projects in terms of how the process with which you kind of dealt with the idea of the historicity of the building and how to contemporize it for future use. So Tim, if I could ask you to start with that.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Yeah, I mean, it's very different with each project, and you do absolutely have to spend your time unveiling what is obviously like Natalie has done and Paran has done. There's a little bit of that investigation. Sometimes it's falling off, and you've got to look at the layers, and then you have to establish where you want to draw that line. In our case, we had profanities written. Some graffiti shouldn't really have stayed. So in that case, you sand that off. But actually, we sand back to the point where it actually just felt right. If it was loose and crumbling, we crumbled it. Sometimes we chose to, if it was almost perfect, we fixed it. And that's often the case with very historic buildings. But with the buildings that haven't really hit that particular super high grade, we can give it a slightly heavier hand and enjoy the layers. In the case of our staircase, we added a floor. We added a floor to the building, and that's another thing I think is important. When the buildings can take another floor, often the engineering can take extra weight, and we've been adding quite a few floors to 1950s buildings and giving them a new lease of life by giving them some steroids, if you like. In the case of the department store, just the one gentle floor is all it could take, and we chose to put columns on top of columns. But this is a steel frame building, but we chose to put timber. It's lighter, but also the new craft. We were loving the fact we had an arts and craft building. What are the new crafts? We can't bring back William Morris, but digital craft is in our designers' hands now, and we could put round columns on top of the round plastered columns that below on top of steelwork. But the staircase, we would choose to find the artisans that probably only exist because of the arts and crafts movement of 100 years ago. The whole point of that was to try and hang on to people who could do a barley twist in a metal stair balustrade. And sometimes it's almost our duty to become foster those craftsmen and craft ladies and find those crafts that things are being handed down, and we're almost reaching down 100 years to the generations that are still doing it because they love it, not because there's a massive demand for it with the industrial world we live in, to embrace that craft and enjoy the staircase going up as a replica. So sometimes the replica's entirely right because we can bring on the craft. Other times we take out the loose plaster. We don't try and copy it badly because we can't do it as well. I mean, we could 3D scan it, which we did a bit, but we just plaster it in and then just enjoy the layers of the craftsmanship and the time. So it's a small summary to answer your question.
I'm actually going to dig a little deeper into the department store project, because I was very curious to know that you also mentioned that the building has been occupied and has served various functions over a period of time. And it has, interestingly, gone from being a store to a storeroom to a post office to having squatters lived over there, and you've got graffiti as evidence. At what point do you, when you start to peel off the layers, and this is something I think, Natalie, would be relevant to you as well, is that when you start to peel off the layers in a building, at what point do you say, okay, I'm going to stop now? And, there you might always find more history as you dig deeper, but you're stopping at some points. And what's interesting at the department store is that in areas you did kind of peel more, and you've, gone back 100 years, and in some areas you've left it down to the last 50 years or 15 years for that matter. So at which point do you decide that, okay, I'm going to stop here now? Is it really that intuitive?
Very much so. It really is emotive, and you have to. The only way we could do it, our other offices are in King's Cross, which, for anyone who knows London, that's like big 12 o'clock on London, and Brixton is at 6 o'clock. And the good thing is we've got the Victoria line that can do that whole underground. It's like a time machine. We can get there in 20 minutes, even though you're covering quite a lot of miles. But the reason for saying that is I was able to come into the department store every single morning at 7:30 till 8:30 with the builders when they're first here, talk to everybody, and literally be like Harry Selfridge walking the building. And because you can imagine the decorators never done anything like it. What do you mean sand and stop, and where do I keep it? So you have to get to know all the individuals, but effectively live sketch it out until it feels right. And you find things. So you may have said, oh, can you take, a new project we're doing in Victoria, another warehouse we thought we knew really well, an Army and Navy warehouse. And we thought, oh, well, this is just a new intervention concrete lift shaft. Is only when we took off all the boards, or we found underneath it the caged Victorian lift that no one even realized was there. And therefore we changed the design. Well, the plan was to completely take out the lift, do a much better stair and a bigger lift. Once we found it, we changed the brief, changed the program whilst on site, because what you find speaks to you, and you've got to listen. You can't, unlike much of what we do as architects and designers, design it up front, think. Then you save time on site, and you keep on to time and budget. It's a little bit the opposite. You have to sample, test, explore, and you need that time. But you can start on site early, though, much earlier.
Because you're not building ground up. You're responding to the conditions that are presented to you. And Natalie, you said, even in the project that you did, which was interesting with the
ash,
tunnels, where the ash tunnels would kind of fall through, right? It's something that you just discovered on site, and then you had to respond to it.
I guess that you have to accept that this is a dynamic process. It's not like you draw it, you get the approvals, and you're done with it. No, it's nothing like that. So you do the 3D mapping, you do the research treatments, but once you get inside the building and start the work, you have to be mindful of your surroundings. And all these very talented people, restorators, conservators, working on each surface, they also are a part of this, and you have to be in touch with them to make them understand your approach, that you don't just want to get rid of a layer, and you just don't want to conceal something. You just want to know what is there, and then you can make a rightful decision. In our experience, for example, as I said, we had this 2 industrial buildings, one the power plant, the other the steam station. The steam station being in this a very bad environment where it burned, with oils and gas inside. It almost destroyed all the patina inside the building, and structurally it wasn't in a very stable status. But oppositely in the main building, the museum building, the power plant, we could all see this patina. We could, see all these layers. The building was intact. It was preserved relatively well. So we had to make different kinds of decisions there. So I guess there's not a prescription for it, but you have to be mindful of the exact situation and environment you're in. And as I said, in our experience, the place had so much history in that city. So anybody we talked in our colleagues, regular people, somebody in their family worked there. So they had all these memories from, whether it's from the, football courts, whether it's from the theater, or whether it's from when they were worked there. All the people of Kayseri had some sort of reminiscence of this place. So I guess it started with us, saving that place, because years ago, the municipality actually took some part of the complex and built some 18-story buildings around it. So this place, being in the middle of the city, was already attracting all sorts of investors, and they are saying like, what are these old buildings doing here? Instead, we could build something new, and we can, make here economically viable again. But luckily now there is a giant public space in the middle of the city, and it's economically sustainable itself. And by doing this, museum, we have the galleries, restaurants inside. So it is like a working machine again. Also, I wanted to ask Puran about this, the areas that you designed, had the proposal, these nice public areas. And in my experience, doing this is okay, but sustaining is very hard. So in terms of sustainability of the areas that you propose, in my experience, if it's not economically sustainable, then it's very hard to maintain it, but just public funds. So what do you think about that in your propositions?
So Natalie, there are a couple of thoughts over here. I agree with you. At the same time, this city, the city of Bombay, surprises us. The things that you believe that there are challenges about, it very easily manages those things. So there are public spaces, there are promenades in the city, there are public parks, there are public spaces which have been converted into very viable solutions, utility for public, and giving them the function that it's required for. And they've been maintained. They've been maintained not by the authorities, not by the government, not by the statutory bodies, but by the corporate world. So there's the corporate world that supports these public areas, where they take some part or the other and maintain it completely. So whether there are traffic islands or parks or open areas like promenades and stuff, they have been taken over, and they have classically been maintained very well in Bombay, unlike some other cities in India. So that gives us hope. That gives us hope that if there is heart in the right place for the authorities to give it a green signal, and there are corporates which we are hoping, there are stakeholders within the state estate as well. There's a body of corporates in Ballard State that have not only presence there, but they have a long-time commitment to the zone. So we're hoping that they come to the party, and they will look after these spaces once they've been designed and given to the public, given to the community by us. We are really hoping to do that at multiple levels. First, to get the permissions, and two, to bring in the people who will maintain, bring in the corporate world that would maintain these spaces. I'll take one step back, however, and go back to what Tim was talking about, Mrinalini, and that's something that resonated completely. And likewise, Natalie, to you too. He talked about this being an emotive process. Now, I don't think it's possible to think of adaptive reuse unless you have an ingrained emotion for adaptive reuse of buildings, of architecture. So in the first place, the prerequisite is that you must have love for what exists already, and you have that inquisitive aspect in your personality to go beyond what you see, as Natalie talked about, okay, you want to go and see what's happening in that basement, and where there's tunnels, or where there's the lift. We've been through that journey in our buildings, in the buildings where we have worked in Bombay, not only the one where we are sitting here, but in every building that we go and we start unearthing. It's not only a dynamic process, as you say, Natalie. I think it's a discovery for ourselves along with the process. We go and discover as we keep unpeeling, as we keep peeling off the layers, and we see that there is so much that you had not seen at the first instance. For example, there's a small little den beyond another flight of stairs in this building itself, which is a portion that's crafted from the next door office, and we never knew that that could be accessed as we reached here, Tim. And then you take that flight, and it's almost a stairway that leads nowhere, leave alone heaven. And then voila, something else happens there, and you start, removing the plaster, and you see wonderful brickwork there, and embedded timber in there, and the rafters drooping down to a 5 feet height. So there's strange discoveries there. There are very romantic discoveries like these in the buildings that we work in, whether it's in the estate, in Ballard Estate. You suddenly see a half-finished arch vanishing into the floor, and you wonder what's an arch doing at the floor. And then you realize that floor was built subsequently. There's another floor below whose shut opening actually has that arch which has sneaked into your floor. Things like that. So classically, when you work in Fort and in Ballard State and in Kulava and in south part of Bombay, you have such a beautiful discovery, the journey for discovery, which every project reveals to you. And I think, and I'm sure the two of you would agree with me over here, you grow every time that you work on a project like this. You grow yourself as a person, as somebody who has something to learn all the time. I learn with every project. I learn so much more. So yeah, that's
yeah. But also we have to nurture our clients with us as well, right?
Natalie keeps bringing it back to that, and we'll do that in another forum. We will.
Yeah.
Well, it is an important part of the equation. You can't ignore that.
I already mentioned that. I only said that to me, the mantra is conviction. If I have the conviction, I will take my client with me. The client must believe that he or she is in the right hands, and you must believe that you do know what you're talking about, what you're trying to do over here. It's worked. Most times it's worked for us.
Just coming back to, Natalie, what you had said about the economical viability of projects. Puran, I'm just wondering if you had looked into the High Line, which is actually a public-private partnership between the city of New York and there's an organization called Friends of the High Line, if I'm not mistaken, that are partially funding it. And I think that is one of the most successful adaptive reuse public projects. Right? And that have really, it's caused an impact in the community. And Purun, I wanted to ask you that, I know yours is just a proposal at the time being, but is this something that you have gone out and spoken to people about? Have you kind of done a survey? What do you think how do you think this project would impact the social cultural fabric in that area?
So to answer the first part of your question, we've been making presentations as we speak, not only here at the Loft, but among the design fraternity and also in colleges. We are trying to create awareness about this project to start with. As many people know about this and relate with this, that much more support, that much more solidity that we have behind the project. Now, as far as the proposing this and taking it further is concerned as an aspect, we intend speaking to some of the stakeholders within the community, within the area. We started having a dialogue. We started making people aware that we do have something on board, which is going to make that neighborhood a different place altogether. Right now, Ballard State is an area where people are a little concerned, a little apprehensive of being there post sunset. It's not a very it's not a very vibrant, energetic area post hours. But we want to bring that life to Ballard State through this proposal, and to stakeholders and people who already have businesses there, art galleries, furniture stores, lifestyle stores, media companies. Condé Nast happens to be having its offices and its base there. We intend bringing them on the same page that these are the areas that their people, they themselves as businesses would enjoy most. However, the authorities is one block which which we may be stumbling over, where we need to make sure that the Port Trust and the municipal corporation need to be made aware of the project. I don't really think the funding for the project is going to be a very tall ask, given the fact that there are corporates already there. We have some very big corporate houses that are there as part of Ballard Street, and I think we would try and create awareness among those corporate houses in order to bring life to the project once the authorities give it a green signal. I'm very, very hopeful that in a world where people have gotten over their anxieties of what we're going through at the moment, people will be oriented towards making life far more, fuller, so to speak, far more balanced, so to speak. There are so many things that are lacking in our work life. We don't have any place to step out of the buildings and be if you want to. You feel like having a decent time and just go to a park or go to some green space, have a breakout area. There's no such thing, Melanie, in Bombay. And we're trying to see if we can create that in a neighborhood where there is character. You already have the character, the inherent character in architecture needs to be capitalized on. That's where our plea lies, that we need to take it to people and make it useful for them.
I think what's really interesting to see is that some of the cities that do this very productively and very effectively, like, for example, Rome, all of Italy for that matter, every nook and corner, every courtyard, right? It needn't be more than 2 feet by 2 feet, and you've got people
And there's a space
utilizing it, and
Exactly.
these public spaces are activated. In India, I feel that there is this inherent sort of resistance to public spaces or to especially enclosed spaces, and that's something that maybe for another discussion, but is definitely a factor that sort of emerges in this situation. I did want to bring this question to Natalie and Tim as well, in terms of the social impact, the social cultural impact that each of these projects have had in your specific environment. Also keeping in mind that both these buildings are somewhat public buildings, or parts of them are public buildings, right? So they have been rehabilitated. Natalie, you mentioned that there are a lot of other buildings that have sort of come up in the area that have caused people to focus their attention to this space. So if you could comment on this.
Well, quite funny for us. This is when we first started the project, this was going to be the city campus of AGU University, so that they had another campus like 15 kilometers from the city center. It was a huge campus, and this was supposed to be city campus, open for everyone. So the first thing the client asked from us was to design a border wall, which they could secure the area. We were like, come on, this is a city campus. What are you talking about? And these were the people from the faculties, the people from faculties, the people from the university, and funnily enough, before attempting to get into this project, they went through all of the world, to the United States, to Europe, wherever, to inspect and see the other campus type universities. For example, they go to Stanford. Stanford, is there a limit to Stanford University? No. Or is there a limit in NYU? No. It's all integrated with the city, with the streets, whatever. So it was very, I think, wrong of them to ask about this, and we had to get into these talks and discussions with them, trying to convince them not to start this with a border, if you will. But I think at the end we achieved to make this place a public hub again. Now they have, of course, the university programs, but also these cultural programs. So the schools, public, get into the area and experience the environment. Also, I should say that this is an ongoing process. So more than half of the existing buildings renovations aren't done yet, and it will just, I think, go on. But I should say that it's now not in danger of turning into a new residential development. It's now safe and secure, and hopefully will develop more and more within the years to come.
So Natalie, what is the time frame for this project from the time that you started designing it to the time that you went out to construction and then further on?
In 2012, it was the first time I went there, and that year we started to design. I think the first warehouse conversion project nearly finished in 2014. And that same year, we started working on the design of the museum and library. And it took almost 3 to 4 years to finish. I think in 2018, the museum and library opened. No, 2017. So yeah, it was open. So totally 5 years, and it's still going on, we should say.
That's interesting. That's actually not too long. I mean,
I
compared
know.
to a regular project.
I know.
you would think, right?
But in standards for Turkey, I should say that we took our time. Yeah, I know that it was a very fast-paced process, because they wanted to relocate to the campus as soon as possible to start the education. Before that, they had somewhere else to start to go with the educational process, but it was nearly not like a very nice environment for students to come. So they wanted to build as fast as possible. So actually this affected the way of our design as well. The first building that I showed, the conversion of the warehouse, we designed the building sort of like a machine. All the parts that formed this new addition steel structure, it was prepared and manufactured in outside the site, and then it was like like a machine, all became a part in the site. So it was a rather a fast process, because we had built everything outside the project site, basically. So it affected the way of our design and production as well. So it was quite fast, but not for the library and museum building. I think we took our time there to really explore what is there. And also the one thing that I should mention is that so this is a dynamic process, and these are heritage buildings which are listed, registered. So every decision you have to take to the Heritage Council, and you have to get the approvals. So for example, in the museum building, where we, every day you see something new. For example, we discovered the ash pits. So these were all the additional approval stages. You take people from the Heritage Council to the site, you make the presentations, you show them, you make them understand. So although it was not a long process by European standards, but also our process was, more than what we expected, because of all these additional decisions.
Tim, how about you? You have a similar process. I mean, you have a similar sort of situation where you're building within the city. You've got this old building that you're redoing. What were your sort of main challenges in this project for you?
No, I think we were very lucky, because the building was so forgotten. It's that even the heritage sort of bureaucracy hadn't even identified it. You could have actually still knocked it down. So
really? So you didn't have to go through all the paperwork?
We have to do planning, but we don't have to go to all the heritage that we have, all listed buildings in this country. And then, exactly like Natalie's saying, you then have to get approval for every single thing you do. And you've got a multitude of opinions. The great thing for us was it being so neglected. And this is where you see the difference with, you mentioned it earlier, the Tate Modern wasn't listed, but the Battersea Power Station was. And then sometimes by things not being overly preserved gives you the freedom and the confidence to give the building back a personality, not 10 academic personalities of what people think the building should be. It's not a museum. We can't have everything as a museum. That's no good. We want to bring life, put the soul back in the building. And Brixton, it really is. It's one of the most multicultural, vibrant. We've got the highest amount of small independent shops. There's barely a chain shop in here, and it's quite unusual for London. It's more like village life, because people just stop and talk to each other. They ask you, what are you doing? Why is that? What's this? What's going on in there? And
That's strange.
but once you get into the spirit of that, recognizing that's why we it's what we wanted to do, these galleries. And back in King's Cross, we did a King's Cross picnic. We turfed the cobbled streets. We had bunting up. We got people. We did a graffiti wall, but we kind of really had to try and encourage the community to get engaged. In Brixton, they were already knocking on the door saying, "What's going on? I hear you've bought this building. What can I move in?" And so by doing the Brixton Design festivals, we could embed ourselves in the creatives who are already down here. They've even created their own currency called the Brixton Pound. There's a lot of free thinking to keep money being spent in Brixton. So we embraced that community, added our creative energy. We created a design trail all over Brixton, and by offering up the blank canvas, we got to meet everything from local schools who took on the canvas to a brilliant artist called Abe Odina, who's already made it good. He's exhibits in the Met, New York Met.
Wow.
But bless him, if you look him up on Wikipedia, he lists down, I've also exhibited in Brixton Street Gallery. I mean, it's a derelict shop window, but suddenly we've turned it into something that sits alongside the New York Met, and someone who's risen from a local guy to being sort of an international artist. But he wanted to be part of the roots here as well. We commissioned some art, but also did some of our own, and by doing that we realized the power of display, and then the more we were learning from buildings and researching what department stores are. I mean, that's a big debate anyway right now, what becomes of them, but I think their futures here to stay. Just need to change and to be a bit more of an experience how they once were. That inquisitive nature that we're lucky enough to have as a sort of given talent as architects and designers is in everybody. And what we wanted to also do is use the power of the windows to talk, not to sell things, but actually to sell dreams, if you like. So we specifically in our model shop window, having gone through these two kind of street galleries and really engaged with people, and the community really got behind it, is then it doesn't just stop there, whether we just fill it up with balloons for no good reason, or other times we've got a really considered piece. Like right now for London Festival of Architecture, we've got a piece. The theme this year is care for obvious reasons, and
Right.
And we did a program working with two local schools, also my daughter's school is not far away in Wimbledon, and just getting everyone to talk about care. And it could be part of an art project, it could be part of a social project that they're all discussing, and everyone's words on care are all being hung up in our window on tiny little bits of paper, like a bit like sort of Tibetan prayer flags. And what's powerful for the school children, and actually we've opened up to the public too, is they never quite believe they can be part of a serious shop display window, seeing something that's just a sketch become reality, and give that dream to young children, but also just anyone walking by. We specifically put sketchy things in to break down the barriers of I can't draw, I can't design. To use the windows as a communication tool that is free. It's a free gift we can give.
Very nice.
And the feedback we get from that is enormous, and I think it's really made us think. We do some of it instinctively, but actually I think there should be more of a considered program for all buildings and our clients of what is this building going to do when it hit on just activate it, let's put some retail in, really curate and program what's going on. I like Paran's work in the streetscape as well. I mean, lots of the department stores back in the day here, there's sort of Pompeii evidence of it. It's pretty derelict, not as old as Pompeii, but there's mosaics that come out and they control the threshold. It goes beyond the window. It goes beyond the boundary, so everyone can have a little dance on the mosaics if they want. And we put back those new mosaics in a strong monochromatic design, but that it just changes the way people behave and makes them feel.
Right.
So I think that's really important in all of our projects. And I think this building's really taught us that. Brixton's taught us that. Yeah, so it's impactful.
I'm sure somewhere. Sorry, Mrinalini. I
go
just
ahead,
wanted. I
Purab,
just
go
want,
ahead.
wanted to add to what Tim's saying. I think somewhere you would have found that your design house gets its definition, its identity through this building now, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. We had been learning our way on. I mentioned the project in Victoria. We actually got introduced because of that, one of the buildings in Victoria, to a brilliant client called Alessandro Crivelli, who invested.
Mm-hmm.
He owned and bought almost the Milan industrial quarter. I love space, light and volume, and he pulled all the fashion houses, and Salone Immobilia happens every year in those fantastic spaces. He wanted to come to London and find some amazing building. We'd already got permission for this old post office in Victoria to convert it into 200 apartments. He's like, no, I'm going to buy it and turn it into a fashion house. And the London property market were laughing at him. It's ridiculous. But he was bold enough to do it, and he did it, and very ahead of the curve by presenting things in a different light that people haven't thought about. It's better a better way of doing things. And he's now doing magic things in New York, and he's in and transform Tribeca and draw people into different areas because of the quality of the heritage assets that were being overlooked and the flexibility of them.
Yeah, of course.
I actually wanted to ask that since all three of you have been, involved in such projects, and the ones that you presented are not the only adaptable reuse projects that you have done, but from your specific experiences being in different parts of the world, do you hope that these projects would somehow become examples to showcase dexterity in architectural use of space and encourage? Have you felt in your experience that your works are encouraging others to go ahead with adaptive reuse of other buildings? So we're looking at three different cities, three different countries of the world.
Exactly. So as far as Bombay is concerned, Mrinalini, let me tell you that like us, there are people, not only from the design fraternity, but from various walks of life who do believe in preservation of architecture, of the spirit of architecture, and the spaces, the soul of the spaces to be reinducted into these spaces.
There and especially in South Bombay, I believe there's a lot happening there, because there is also a large concentration of architects in that area.
So not just the architects and designers, but art community. There are creatives. There are people who are into films, into writing, into media. People who do realize the value of architecture and don't want it to go to waste. They don't want good architecture going to waste. There can be mindless building on the outskirts of the city. Now, I'm not against development. I'm not against building. Somewhere we are architects and we do need to express ourselves with new designs in principle. But here comes the dilemma. But I believe the right thing, I believe the sensible thing is, what you can't find a replacement for, you should go and build. You should definitely build what you cannot find in existing architecture. But if there is a certain utility value that you can find in what exists, we must try and reuse that first. So say if there's a function of a certain industry or a certain floor plate that I can't find in South Bombay because there's a restriction in terms of the kind of floor space that I have in the buildings here, then by all means, the clients must look for spaces way away from the city where you can have larger campuses or large floor plates. But if you have smaller requirements, which the city buildings can cater to, we should do that. So there are people who already do have that sort of sensibility and that sort of bent towards existing beautiful architecture. There is no dearth of people, at least in South Bombay. But the important aspect of us as design houses doing this, and we see that change every day, Mrinalini. We see young people connecting with us. Tim. Natalie, I do not know what's it like in London, Istanbul. I'm sure there are young people, there are young minds that are connecting with you people, your firms, getting inspired by the work that is being done in a sensitive fashion in regenerating the urban fabric, which is so important, just as important as building something new. So there are a lot of young people, not only that we feel not only identify with this aspect, but because they have their head-heart balance that we find in their sensibilities, they are extremely connected with this aspect of reutilization or regeneration.
I'd love to hear Natalie and Tim's experiences, and we can then pick up a couple of questions from our audience as well.
I can say that we did a major adaptive reuse project in Istanbul many years ago called Central Istanbul. It was also a forgotten part of the city, a very dense part, and it was another first generation power plants of Istanbul. We had the chance to regenerate that also into a university campus, and it was that project that we had the chance to work on Sumer project as well, because our clients saw that project, saw how that regeneration regenerated all the environment, all the area, all the surrounding neighborhoods, because also this is an educational institution, but also it has all these public programs that could engage the neighborhood within. So it was that project that we had the chance to move on to Kayseri. Also, right now we are finishing a museum project. We are converting an old warehouse building near Bosphorus into the first painting and sculptural museum of Istanbul. This is also the same project that our clients saw in Istanbul, Central Istanbul, and asked us to do this project. We were kind of lucky in that way, but also I think we recognized what was special in each project and convinced our clients to bring it back.
Tim, how about you? Have you had have your clients seen your work and brought more work to you?
Oh, no, it's absolutely, and even better when you've got a restaurant that they can bring other clients to. It's a showcase. They're like, even other clients are saying like, "Oh my God, what am I doing? I'm bringing customers to you. This is absolutely genius." But I think
so notes to self for everyone: try to incorporate a restaurant into your project.
Exactly, make it a showcase.
Oh, yes.
But then you can make it a showcase for everybody. But going back to the young people. Young talent coming into our office. Even before we moved here, there was a huge kind of reaction, I suppose, to the kind of almost the infamous Bilbao effect that many cities were taking on. The generation who'd grown up with the Bilbao effects happening outside their towns were really quite angry about it, and I was amazed by the amount of people coming in. The students and graduates who their projects were always choosing to do something sensitive. They were reacting to tens of millions of euros being spent on what they didn't quite agree with, when the town centre, their heart and soul was being neglected, and they wanted to come to a practice that did contemporary architecture, but we do it always very sensitively to our location and the community and the place, and just seeing that as a real, obviously as a practice will attract those kinds of people who don't want to be doing sort of skyscrapers in China remotely, but they also don't quite believe in it. Their heart and soul's not there, because they can see what they know, what their families, their places being neglected, and beautiful projects that could be happening sensitively in their town centres. And so it's definitely, and I think it's growing even faster, particularly as everyone's more aware of the climate, more sensitive, more caring of unique experiences. Things aren't just bland, everything's just the same. unique, and these heritage assets have unique qualities. And when we do something new, what can we do that's born out of local craft and something unique to that place, that moment, rather than just it could be anywhere kind of project.
Yes.
It's very encouraging to hear that young people, young practitioners are thinking this way, because I would imagine that many would also think that, even though you have challenges in adaptive reuse and working with an existing sort of structure at hand, but at some level it perhaps, and Puran, you mentioned this as well, that it perhaps might impinge on creative expression on part of the architect, right? Because you are trained to kind of have a blank canvas and build upon it. And so while on one hand, we want to encourage people to look at their existing infrastructure and build with that, it might be a little bit too ambitious to kind of, just say that, okay, put aside your pens and papers and work with what you've got.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up a couple of questions. We're getting some very interesting comments here. There was one for Natalie. It's Sonali Mehta asks, do you find it more fulfilling to work on adaptive reuse projects or to build afresh where you are not carrying forward an original thought process? So on the lines of what we were discussing.
Well, 100%. Any day I would choose to work on an existing building or in an adaptive reuse project, because not all the things that we mentioned before, but also it's the fact that you get to work with all these new sets of professionals to achieve the end result. You have this specialists, you have all the, even specialists for structure in an old building, not like a regular engineer. So, or you have this conservationists. You get to know all these new sets of information from each participant. So it's a very dynamic process, which I kind of like very much. And personally, I find enormous value in the heritage, in the things we inherited, whether it's industrial, whether it's historical. So and these are very, very, very unique situations. You can build a new one, get these kinds of new projects all over the world, similar in program, of course, but these working on an existing structure, it's totally unique and a unique experience as well. So, of course, any day I would choose it.
That's interesting. Tim, we've got Bassam, who talks about the materials that are being used, and especially in the department store, we see such a wide variety of materials that are being used and that you have inherited and have had to work with. So his question is that the materials that are being used in these buildings, do they have an impact in the future? So he says that as I notice, he believes that natural materials are more beautiful. And I think what he also means to say are more sort of aesthetically appealing when you have to restore them as compared to manufactured materials. So given that you've kind of worked with both sets of materials in your projects, what would you have to say to that?
No, I think it's like I said at the beginning, really, you've got to scratch away and see what materials you have. That palette is there, but actually you can really then learn from that palette. Like, where's it come from? Why is it that? Why is it a red brick, not a yellow brick? We even found some white bricks, and we're like, they must have just got some cheap order of kiln bricks and just utilize those. But so you get a rich palette. Looking at the timbers, of course, there's some beautiful timbers here. There's teak and oak. There's teak and mahogany on our ground and first and second floors. Of course, we shouldn't be using that now, but the best thing we can do is, because it was such amazing quality, all we had to do was sand it. Now, some of it was a little bit live and a bit loose, but it would have been astronomical and actually unnecessary to take it all up and put it back down again. We can just fix it as we go. We're going to be in here, and actually you can save yourself a fortune just by doing it as you go. It doesn't all have to be done in one. The building can keep changing. But what we did learn was there's not a single white wall in this building. everything is a natural material. It's all actually true to itself. There's no real sort of pigments and dyes that are unnatural, manufactured. They are from a period where it just was it's in its natural color. If they were, and we let that become our code. So adding to the materials that are here. So on the floor I'm sitting on, this is actually it's a green oak floor. So it was not even, it's not even the right grade to be putting on the floor, but we decided we're going to live with it. It's going to move a little bit, but we didn't mind. But then we can just sand it and carve it down. But that's a perfectly good renewable material to put on top, and it complements the others. And then the other natural materials we wanted to use was the plywood. So we used birch face ply in a stained and non-stained palette. So most of it though is just adding to the palette that's already here. With the extension we've done, that we've learned this building has become the designer for next door in many ways, where everything is just raw and honest as much as it possibly can be. So I think, yeah, you've got to draw from the materials that are there, and then
I'll add a bit. Sorry.
Yeah, please do. No, I'm done.
Sorry. So now I was just taking the point forward, Tim, where I wanted to. So we feel the same. The textural quality, the materials that we inherit in old buildings become a large part of design. I think the design gets driven by the textural value that you discover. So whether it's the bricks that lay behind the plaster, or or you scratch the wood, you take off the polish, the old paint, and the kind of quality that old teak wood that has been there for 100 years here in this building. This gives you such immense pleasure in discovering it.
And I suppose some of the most quirky layers we've added, which is a bit of the digital technology, digital craft, which is actually very economic, is we did find when we took down one wall that had been filled in an old mosaic threshold, a little bit like the Chipperfield, the Berlin museum, but they had beautiful mosaic thresholds, but we couldn't afford, or it didn't seem right to be putting mosaic thresholds back in. So we just fixed that one by putting screed around the bits that were missing. But all our other thresholds in the building, we used the Eli Kishimoto patterns, and we printed plywood. So it's like £200. It's not much for a whole sheet. But we're like 4 years, and if it wears, we can do a new pattern.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's
you
a
can
little
patch
block
it.
here.
You patch it. Yeah, you can patch in, and it's a joy.
So there's a little block here, which is about 200 square feet within the office, within the studio space. It's one step up. And actually the wood on the floor is completely, I can see in the picture that the floor that Tim's talking about is 100 times worse than that. It's warped, but it's got such rich texture that I've actually used that as part of the server room and an executive bathroom that we have over there, which is for the visitors. And that entire floor has got such a rustic feel. You can actually sense that it is 100-year-old feel, whether it's the little flights that we have here or this kind of floor. There's something very romantic about materials that you not only discover, but you leave them there. They're not perfect, but they have something very inherently beautiful about them. And I'm sure Natalie has that smile, which she completely identifies with that aspect as well. So we're talking in terms of materials, we're talking about that sort of love for materials and textures, which you constantly are. You're curious beyond what you see. So that's important.
So talking about materials, and again, a very large palette of materials. Pooran, maybe you can take this question, because Yash Redditch is asking the kind of data that should be collected when you're when you're dealing with an adaptive reuse building. So when you're, and especially since you're proposing this area in South Bombay that you want to kind of develop, what kind of data have you been collecting, and what is the process of doing that?
So we have a huge amount of research that's already been put into this, and we've not yet made it public, but we've compiled it. Whether it is the circulation process in that zone, whether it's the transport survey that we have, the parking and the requirements for parking in that area, the green spaces that we have, or the number of stalls that we've got. So there's a whole lot of study on every kind of program that exists already in that neighborhood. And any kind of program that we want to inculcate into the design is part of the research process. So we have data compilation on every possible front, the number of people out in the streets at certain hours. So every hour of the day, whether it is before 9 a.m. in the morning or between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon or after 5 o'clock in the evening, there's a data for not only the traffic, but the pedestrians, the kind of stall and the vendor activity that happens in that zone. There is data and research for all of that. We intend bringing all this study into the detailing of design as we get the approval, as we get the proposal to go into the approval stage. We would like to bring the details on the design development of all of the areas that we're suggesting. So there's an intense amount of study that's already there. I can't possibly share more than the fact that we have looked into every aspect of life as it exists at Ballard State, for people who go to work there every morning, or for people who visit there for some business or the other. There's a complete study on all counts.
Yeah. Okay. Tim, I actually wanted to comment on what you said earlier when you were talking about Brixton and London. I was recently speaking with a designer who has a studio in London and in Athens. And I asked her, what is the major difference between the two? And she turned around and she said, well, in London, I can't crack jokes during my meetings because they fall through the cracks. So, here I'm thinking, well, Athens and London make a lot of difference, but you're literally talking about a 20-minute train ride between London and Brixton.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of changes where people will they've enjoyed not being in the cauldron, really, in the heart of London. And we've got several hearts to this kind of its commercial hub. But once you're into the older suburbs where people work and where people are playing and eating and living, everyone is cracking jokes and having fun. And why not do that when you're at work as well? And I think work will loosen, and certainly more creative businesses will enjoy being in more creative places.
Well, on that, Puran, did you want to add something?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks. I think Tim summed it up very well.
Well, I was looking at the photographs of the department store, and I was very envious of the fact that you've got this beautiful bar on your rooftop, and you can go and kind of
I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there next.
Yeah, well, I think you should, and I think this is a perfect sort of opportunity. I was going to say that I think we've had a great discussion. It is Friday evening for everyone, and I do hope. Yes. I wish that we could all have sat around a table and poured a glass of wine for ourselves.
Sure, but, I'll take that. I'll take that one level higher. Mrinalini, in the world before March 2020, that's how, guys, stories of the Loft will be. Stories would be here. Speakers like Tim and Natalie will come here. They will finish their talk, and then we will break into a party. And Mrinalini, you've not been there for one of those, but of course, yes. I know exactly what you mean, Tim, when you say you're heading up there. I'm coming and joining you for a drink soon at the terrace.
Absolutely. We all must get. Get together.
We all must do that. We all have to celebrate what we've got. And on this very happy note, thank you all for an absolutely wonderful, wonderful discussion preceded by some great presentations. I think it's been very insightful. There's been a great learning. I know that I walk away from this conversation learning a lot and knowing a lot more about what's happening around the world and different ways and processes and approaches to the same thing. I think it was a great sort of coming together of ideas from different parts of the world where, we're doing similar works, but our situations are different, our contexts are different, and therefore the work itself is different. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us and for being so wonderful, but a special thanks to Tim, Natalie, and Puran. Puran, if you'd like to conclude any parting words.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mrinalini, for doing this for us. Thank you, Natalie and Tim. It's been a thought since last year when we had more to think about, when we were all working from home. And I wanted this theme of adaptive use is very close to our hearts here in the studio. I especially think very highly of the concept. Having presented at the World Architecture Festival together, Tim, you and I having been in the same room, Natalie, you and your firm having presented not just this project and winning at WAF, and also going ahead and making a lot of presentations on a similar theme. It was a dream for Studio PKA, one of the visions that we will bring Square and Partners and EAA to come and be with us and speak to the audiences. The objective being, as Mrinalini says, similar theme, similar thought, similar dreams, different locations, different continents, and different areas. So we wanted to bring the context from London, Istanbul, and Bombay together in one room, so to speak. We've done that. Thank you very much for bringing that together for us, and hope to see you guys soon. Stay good. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.
And Tim has been kind enough to send out an open invitation to everyone to visit them in Brixton.
Of course.
I will definitely
Very
volunteer
welcome.
for that.
Everyone's very welcome when we can all move around much more freely.
Sure, of
Yes.
course. Thank you. Thank
you
so
all very much. Have a great Friday evening and a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mrinalini.
Thank you for having
Bye-bye.
us. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.